We're beginning. Welcome to the Health In Show, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community. I'm your host, Debby Bruck, the founder of Homeopathy World Community Social Network, a professional organization for homeopaths. Thank you to all of our returning listeners, viewers, and all of those people who are out there sharing these wonderful shows on pretty serious topics lately. And we're going to be having our guest tune in and sign up in a minute, but our wonderful producer, Amnon Nissan of Nissan Communications, is here working to get everything going smoothly. And, you know, we always have glitches, especially recently. The homeopathic websites have been attacked by hackers, which means that you need to create secure passwords. If you need information about that, Amnon is your man. He teaches classes all about keeping security on your computers. In addition, if you're using older versions of Skype, you probably would like to update to at least version 5.0 or later, so that you are able to log on and get onto videos and group videos with your friends. And we learn this as we come to technical difficulties. Thank you to our wonderful co-host, Dr. Deepak Sharma of New Delhi, India, who runs the Orbits clinics and teaches and lectures widely on community medicine and the practice of medicine. Welcome, Dr. Deepak Sharma.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Amnan. This is really quite good lecture today. We have on the rape is not a joke matter, and it is very like to inform you, Debbie, that the homeopathic websites are hacking today's much, and we are more know about how to make a password and how to make secure our websites. So I request him. He can, if he can, he'll just teach us about them.
You've just been invited to do a show with us, Amnon, to teach us about security. So that's something that he can probably do at the drop of a pin, or is it the drop of a hat, whichever one. And we're going to be introducing our guest, Ehud Sperling, who in I'm going to give you some background. I'm going to give you some background so that when he gets on, he can just dive right into this topic. In 1975, our special guest, Ehud Sperling, opened a small office in New York City, and it is now called Inner Traditions, Bear and Company, because it's actually two publishing houses. It houses more than 1,200 titles, and maybe more by now, across a wide and eclectic range of subjects. Considered one of the largest and oldest publishing houses in the world, Ehud presents the works of many authors devoted to the subjects of spirituality, esotericism, alternative health, indigenous cultures, philosophy, visionary art, ancient mysteries, sexuality, self-development, and now his publishing house includes recordings of ethnic musics and accompaniments for meditation. Ehud has often been asked, quote, "What is your role as a book publisher?" unquote. He replies, "To seed the dream of humanity. We must determine the worthiness of the author's ideas, publish them, and then watch. Every book has its own life, its own destiny. Our work is to put the finest ideas into the hands of our readers and let destiny unfold," unquote. And I'm sure that you have probably picked up a book and read one that comes from his collection. And I also encourage you to visit the Inner Traditions website, innertraditions.com, which is linked also on the Homeopathy World Community main page, and check out all of his own writings, because Ehud has written many well-known books, one of them 7 Lifetimes, another Pyramid Power, and the one he wrote with his wife, Vatsala Sperling, who connected me to him, is called A Marriage Made in Heaven. So pretty soon we're going to have him on the line. We're still working out the upgrades and the technical things back here in the studio, But I'm sure everybody is really waiting to hear about the issue at hand, about this issue of rape in society. It goes across all lines. It covers men, women, children, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, just every level and plane and class of life. Also, the thing is that it touched me to talk about this, and I just asked Ehud, do you want to talk about it? And he said he's willing to talk about any subject. And I was really surprised, but it's going to be great when we get him on. This topic came into my awareness because I am very often getting reports from care2.com. Care2.com is a website that has got alternative information, environmental information, bloggers about every subject, plus petitions. You've probably clicked on a petition there at one time or another. And the story was about a comedian who basically harassed one of the members in the audience. And a Tumblr post titled, quote, "A girl walks into a comedy club," unquote, described an incident wherein Daniel Tosh allegedly teased an audience member saying, quote, "Wouldn't it be funny if that girl got raped by like 5 guys right now," unquote. And later, Tosh had to apologize, and he did, on Twitter for saying that. I think that he felt quite in his domain, in his right, in his, he was in a comedy club, and these are topics. There's no topic that seems to be limited. People in a comedy situation, everything is fodder for them to speak about. We can think about jokes, about joking, about sarcasm, exaggeration, concerns and issues within ourselves of power and control, and how we have an effect on other people. So these are things, if anybody wants to call in, we are at 919-518-9773. That's in the United States, 919-518-9773. And if you are on Skype, you can call in to Computers 2K Voice. Dr. Deepak, have you been thinking about this subject?
Yes, basically I'm thinking about my first lecture on dream of snakes, and we are just relate these dream of snakes to the sexuality. And today in life, basically juvenile sexual crimes are increasing day by day, and the thoughts and the sexual thoughts are increasing day by day, and this will increase the crime, sexual crime in the society. When we are considering about the children, those are not able to understand about the sex. We does not read very well to the children, and we cannot think about the thoughts of the children at the moment. And basically the social and our cultural society are basically responsible for these thoughts. When child gets a loneliness, they watch the websites, they watch videos regarding the pornography, and the sexuality is coming into the mind. And when we talk to the parents are not favorable to the sexual thoughts in the children, and that convert into the crime range, and that will also increase the crime.
So you're saying it's the upbringing of our children that is influencing this extreme violence? I mean, I consider it an assault, a violent act, something against nature. Unfortunately, I was listening to the BBC News this morning on the types. I mean, they're now prefacing their world news by saying this is may not be ears for listeners, people who cannot even turn on and listen to this type of information. It even frightens me. It makes me, it does impact me just to hear about the things, the types of torture that is going on in the world. And we need to preserve our sanity, our feeling of security in some ways, to protect our own souls, our vital force, from even hearing the news. And yet, I feel we have to speak out and do something about it to stop it. And it is this dichotomy of how we live in this world. Do you want to comment about that?
Debbie, can you hear me?
Basically,
Yes, I can.
Let's take a short technical break. Ehud,
Yeah, I think I should just.
you did not upgrade, or
right now. Let me tell you what I think we need to do. Okay. First of all, if you would have told me I needed this version of Skype, I would have installed it.
Yeah.
Right now, it seems to be updating in the background because when I go. So I don't think you're going to get this upgrade. I've got too slow a connection, and you might need to shut the computer off and restart it to get the connection. So I can just beg out of this conversation, and we can do it some other time. I also can't really hear Dr. Sharma, so it's just gobbledygook.
Or you can keep doing it with video.
Or I can just do an audio conversation with you. But we need to make a decision about that. Either go back to what you had before where you had a video signal, or just use my audio signal, or let me just bow out and we can do this some other time.
It's up to you. That's up to Debbie.
Okay, Debbie.
I think I would love to just hear your voice, even if we cannot see you.
Okay. And also understand that I can't really hear Dr. Sharma properly. I get maybe 1 in every 3 words.
Okay, that happens occasionally due to the internet connection to India, and
aware of that. So I think that actually this idea of having 2 people talk at the same time in this context simply doesn't work.
Okay.
So why don't you do your interview with Dr. Sharma, then end that. I'll listen on. Remember, I got to get off the phone at about 10 to 10. And then I can just have an audio conversation with you. The video is not in any way necessary as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think Debbie explained. Dr. Sharma is not just a guest. Dr. Sharma is a co-host. He's always on the show.
Whatever he is, whatever his title and position and involvement.
Okay,
it's not lending to the conversation because I can't actually hear what he's saying.
Yeah.
So take it from there.
All right. Okay. So it's okay. Just stay there and. Maybe Debbie will just jump in and ask you questions. And,
we can
then
get started.
At the end, we can do that. I mean, I don't know you.
Unless you wanted to shut down your computer totally and restart and come in later, but
I can try that, see if it works. But
Okay, why don't we just talk?
I think that makes a lot of sense since we planned this and we've already put a lot of time into it. So what I would suggest is that Dr. Sharma listens in, and after I finish talking, if he wants to say something, if people can hear him, that's fine. But let's not try to have a 3-way conversation. It's not working.
That sounds good.
Okay,
so I did an introduction for you, and I don't know whether you were able to hear that.
The audio is absolutely no problem.
Okay, so we're ready to listen to your thoughts. I even sent you this morning a little article.
I read that. So why don't you just go back on the air, ask your questions, and I'll take it from there.
Okie doke. So we're really we're back, and I sent an article to Ehud this morning even that in different countries there are actually thinking about blaming women or as being provocative, and that is one of the causes and reasons for rape to occur. And perhaps, Ehud, you can start at any point and just talk to us about rape in society.
Well, I'm certainly not qualified to talk about rape. What I can talk about is the human experience and how it unfolds over time. And the current events that you're describing, first Tosh, a comedian that's on Comedy Central, insulting a lady by saying, let's gang rape her. Well, he's just a jerk, isn't he? And he also appeals to that kind of frat house humor on his TV show. So that's who he is. And if this woman came to see him, you have to also wonder why is she there? So, and also, I don't find the whole matter of any consequence or significance. Humor is always or in large part at the expense of others, whether it's ethnic groups, gender, whatever it might be. Comedians tend to denigrate and ridicule, and that's part of their job. So you don't have to listen to them, and that's fine. This piece that you sent me today about an imam in, I believe it was Toronto, suggesting women should cover themselves completely. I'm with him, provided his people, meaning the men, will also cover themselves in a full body prophylactic. They should have something like that on their body to insulate us from their negativity and foolishness. When you think back in terms of culture, everyone's ancestors were running around naked 10,000 years ago. And even go into earlier periods of the great cultures, take India, for example, particularly in the south, in Kerala, even as late as the mid-19th century, women were bare-breasted. In fact, one of the famous painters, portrait painters, Ravi Vimar of Kerala, painted paintings of these beautiful women bare-breasted in the south of India. And that didn't incite the male population of Kerala, of the southwest coast of India, to go on a rape rampage. So really, when you talk about rape or abuse of any kind, you really need to look at it in the context of the culture and how the culture deals with the most animalistic, the most lowest levels of the human nature. In fact, Hanuman said that the spiritual vital force was here to help lift up mankind to a higher state of consciousness. So really what we're talking about here is how do we help people, as physicians, homeopaths, healers, or concerned citizens, how do we help people that have been traumatized? And how do we as a culture work towards an environment that doesn't support the lower and baser nature of humanity, but seeks to raise up humanity? And that's the fundamental question here. Why is there rape? Why is there rape in mythology, in society, in ancient societies? Why does it exist as something in the human experience? Well, that could be a whole conversation in itself. And in a way, it isn't even relevant, because what's really relevant is the two aspects that affect us all. One is the trauma that women and others experience, and the other is what can we do to help lift up humanity, to lift up the consciousness, to lift up the sentiment and the experience that we have with each other. That there are negatives in the human experience, I think we can all agree that that is the case, and it has always been the case. You think that you can eradicate murder or eradicate rape or eradicate bad behavior? I don't think so. At the best, we can hope to take a certain part of our human experience and lift it up, and in so doing, lift up others with ourselves.
You've created a much broader view of the topic, that we have forces in the world that are positive and negative, good and evil, these two forces fighting against each other, and we want to bring the goodness in, the light in, and is there a method that we can teach, that we can encourage in the world to do this? considering, when you started out saying in primitive peoples or in India, women did walk around bare-breasted and shod, clothed in very little, and it was just part of the culture, a common way of life. And today we are dressing in a very sexual, provocative way. Is this something we want to look beautiful? I mean, we want to be attractive. Is there a way to do that and yet not bring in the...
What's the popular song right now with the teens? I'm sexy and I know it.
Yeah. Well, everything.
So
I think it's marketing.
I actually think that the issue of sexuality is something that we could discuss, and is an issue fundamental to the society. That the society is being sexualized, that things are being sold using sex. That sex is indicated as the goal to be achieved, the prize that you win as a male, and that women are expected to be seductive and attractive and enhance their sexual attraction to men, is all part of the culture we're living in. But to me, sex is really not the issue. It comes back to the fundamental issue of who we are and what we're seeking to do in our lives and what the meaning of life is. And when you asked, is there a way to do this, the technologies for raising consciousness exist in every culture and every age and have been practiced. Now, according to the Hindu tradition, we're in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and decline, of speed and destruction. And like everything, society, culture, the planet, goes through a organic process of what you might call the seed stage, the beginning stage, where everything is contained and hidden within the seed. And then the seed finally expresses itself, and you see a beautiful flower, and eventually the flower yields to the fruit, and the fruit might be the highest form of culture and civilization. But eventually the fruit rots and drops to the ground and decays, yielding a new seed. And the new seed comes through its cycle and flourishes and decays as well. So there's a certain aspect of the zeitgeist in all of this, the spirit of the time, the nature of the times we're living in. And you can rail against the nature of our times, you can fight against the nature of our times, or you can seek another way. And my suggestion is that both in terms of therapeutic modality, this is indeed a homeopathic show, in terms of the therapeutic modality, we need to look to the physical and psychic and spiritual nature of the people that come to us for help and try to deal with their traumas, at the same time offering some positive, uplifting message about what's possible with life. So if you are indeed healthy enough and have a clean enough heart and a clean enough psyche to look to spiritual development, that spiritual development and the technologies for spiritual development are available. We publish hundreds and hundreds of books from the Jewish tradition, books on Kabbalah, from the Hindu traditions, whether it's yoga or pranayama or other techniques for enlivening and enlightening the body-mind complex. There's lots of technologies in the West. You have Native American traditions, you have traditions of alchemy and hermeticism that flourished in Europe. There's no end to the paths leading to one simple statement that was made by a great philosopher in the Western tradition. Certainly, probably same words were expressed in the East. Man, know thyself. So knowing rape, knowing abuse is part of knowing thyself, because it's part of who we are. Possibly, speculatively, I would say, maybe a rape has entered our imagination as part of our animal heritage, of the fact that we share a genetic stream with animals who don't necessarily have the sensibilities and ideas that we do about sexuality. After all, when a tiger copulates with a tigress, he has his teeth on her neck, in a position where he could take her life. Now, is that considered romantic, that form, or is it considered rape, animal rape? Well, I'll leave that to the imagination of your listeners. But fundamentally, we know as a society, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. You look at rape in America, and then you can also look at rape as an instrument of warfare in Africa, where consciously, intentionally, soldiers enter a village and rape the women as a way of subjugating the population. So when you talk about suppression, again, you're talking about homeopathy, because we know suppression is the cause of many of the psychic and physiological conditions that people suffer from. So we have to help people get released from suppression, released from trauma, enter a healthy and happy and positive state of mind, and look to really what we can do, both on the individual level and societally, to lift the dialogue, to lift the consciousness, and not to get hung up in the dichotomy of right and wrong, left and right, good and bad, but really look at what is positive for the human experience. Everything is possible in our world. There's some people that would like to blow the whole planet up in a nuclear holocaust. Well, they have the right to think what they want to think. Personally, I'm for the human experience. I want more of the human experience. I want to participate in the human experience, and I want to do things that are productive and supportive for human beings. That's men and women. And that's really the fundamental issue. Trying to put a box around human nature, trying to remove the sexuality from human nature, trying to remove the imaginations about rape and incest and abuse and all these things from the human condition, I think is a failing strategy. But rather, to uplift humanity, to look to the technologies and the therapies and the toolkit that we've been given by our ancestors to enhance our higher nature, that is what the dialogue needs to be about. Because once you reach a certain, in the Eastern tradition, Dr. Sharma could talk about this from his own experience, we look to raise the energy above the lower chakras into the higher chakras, into the heart, the throat, and the pineal, and above the sex chakra and the stomach chakra. That's not to say that sex is bad. Sex is great. One of the greatest things, one of the greatest gifts that we have in our human interactions. So we need to see it as a sacred and a sanctified act, and we need to help others view it as a opportunity for a higher communion. So sex is sacrament. That's the antidote to sex is rape or sex is incest and any of the other kind of deviant and psychologically destructive states that we see around us.
You've given us a lot to think about. So in other words, if I'm hearing you correctly, the animal nature in humanity will always be there. The negative aspects that we have residing within us in combination or also with the good aspects, and you want to enhance the good aspects and bring that into the world where the darker aspects will just be sleeping. Because you said that for like a nuclear holocaust, they have a right to think what they want to think. That's kind of frightening to me to hear that. Of course, we can't stop anybody from thinking anything. So they're going to think whatever they want. But in terms of behavior and acting in the world, we have to somehow, and even we might think about a nuclear holocaust, but in what way are we thinking about it? I'm thinking about it as to eliminate, to not create nuclear warheads, to not have any kind of environmental disaster. So how do we bring that uplifting by making our life a sacrament, by making our life meaningful?
Well, again, quoting the founder of homeopathy in his number 9, right? In the healthy condition of man, the spiritual vital force animates the material body, rules with unbounded sway, and retains parts of the organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operation. And he goes on a bit to say, we can freely employ this living, healthy instrument of the higher purpose of our existence. So I'm not promoting good or bad, right or wrong. What I'm saying is that from the earliest time, from our earliest recollections as human beings, in fact, from the very word human, which is more than man, it's human, it's a higher state, that our goal has been, as Hanuman says, to take that vital force, that spiritual energy that leaves upon death, that enters upon conception, take that vital force and use it for the higher purpose of living. And, you know, wherever I've traveled, I've lived with head shrinkers in the Amazon jungle, the Shuar, in the upper Amazon basin. It's not exactly my lifestyle, but these are people that will take heads and shrink them. And they, like everyone else I've met, from caveman to rocket scientist, want to be respected, want to be treated with dignity, want to have the freedom to express their happiness and their way of living and their culture. So for me, it's a great masala, you know, it's a great mixing of qualities and elements that make up the human experience. And I'm not for suppression and denial. I'm not for repression and tyranny. I'm for freedom. And freedom requires a commitment to the higher purposes of life, because that's what's going to lift you up. And frankly, people are going to think what they're going to think and behave the way they're going to behave, regardless of what we say and regardless of our moral indignation. We need to the best of our abilities and to the strength of our numbers, put out a different type of energy. And I've seen that since I grew up, making a tremendous effect on our society. In the 1960s, you have this whole turning away and from the culture of the 1950s and the introduction of organic foods, the introduction of the spiritual literatures of the rest of the world, the rejection of simple organized religion in favor of a deeper spiritual connectivity with nature and one another. So these are major trends in our world. And at the same time that trend is unfolding and expressing itself, we also see abomination in the behavior. Right now, as we're speaking, people are being slaughtered. Right as we're speaking, in various parts of the world, people are suffering untold hardship and pain. Right at the same time we're talking and discussing. So finally, you know, our hearts have to be open to the misery of the entire human society. And we have to have that understanding that we're in a very privileged environment, a very privileged situation, and that even you know, going back a generation to my parents, what they had to suffer through, leaving Europe prior to World War II, and what my family had to suffer, we have to recognize that there's been a universal Holocaust. And not just the Jews, not just the Australian Aboriginals, not just the Cambodians, not just the Chinese, not just the Russians, not just the Native Americans, not just the Native South Americans, but a universal Holocaust on a scale almost unimaginable to early man. So we're living on an island in a sea of blood. So that's our reality. And that reality is expressive. And it expresses itself in vampire movies and all this incredible violence. You know, I look at the movies of the 1940s and 50s and the sentiments being expressed in those movies and the kind of behavior that's being promoted in those movies. Even though many are excluded. So when you have cowboys and Indians, the Indians are the bad guys and the cowboys are good guys. But there was an idea of a good guy in that era of movie making. You look at movie making today, you know, it's gone beyond, it's postmodern. It's gone beyond any kind of moral values, any kind of specific understanding of what the Indians would call dharma, you know, what the Buddhists would call the middle way. So from my perspective, the energy, the dialogue, the activity, the purpose, the power, the function behind all of this needs to be directed towards the upliftment of our fellows and to understanding our history with a larger gathering of time. So for me, early people are not primitive people. They're fully embodied. They had, so for example, the Australian Aboriginals, when the Barents, a husband and wife team, studied them and lived with them prior to really the modernization or the bringing into the modern world of the Australian Aboriginals, when they lived with tribal groups who were living just as they had lived 100,000 years ago, what did they discover? Well, they discovered that about 20% of the clan, of the group's time, mostly the women's time, was spent in gathering food. And about 80% of the food was gathered by the women and the children, the small children. The men hunted, and they provided about 20% of the food with hunting. And that a few hours a day that was devoted to their food was the only, quote, work that they did. Because they didn't wear any clothing, so there was no garment industry. They didn't do animal husbandry. There was no farming. They didn't plant food. They just hunted and gathered, so there was no agriculture. There was no architecture. They didn't build buildings, monuments, etc. So what were these people doing with their time? If it only took them, you know, the sort of the old idea was that they were scrounging around trying to feed themselves, and their whole life was spent just trying to survive. Well, in fact, when they were studied in depth, about 20% of their waking hours was spent in survival, quote unquote. The rest of the time, what were they doing? Well, they were doing culture and community, the things we do on Friday night and Saturday. They were doing them all the time. Their lives were wrapped in story. So as they moved through the landscape, they moved through their stories and remembered their stories. Their time was spent in ritual activities. So they would spend weeks preparing for ritual, and then they'd do the ritual in a specific space and remember their ancestors in that space and then move on. They also had orgies. Oh my God. What's that all about? You know, an expression of sexuality that you know, we think of as a deviant form was part of their yearly cycle of behavior. They practiced polygamy. So how's that? The men sounds like the men had a better deal. One of our authors was speaking to two Aboriginal women in a settlement, the Tiwi people, on an island off the northern coast of Australia. And they had been kept there kind of as a museum, if you will, of Aboriginal culture. And no one was allowed to visit without government approval. In fact, Margaret Mead did some of her early research there. In any event, Joanna was talking to these two elderly Aboriginal women who had lived the traditional lifestyle of Aboriginals before the whites had come, before they had been colonized, before a Christian mission had been set up on the island. They had lived the way their ancestors had lived for 100,000 years. Now polygamy was banned. So Joanna, who was, I guess, in her 30s at that time, very attractive, beautiful woman, spoke to these two old women and said, well, isn't it, you know, a lot of things have changed for the worse, but isn't it great that polygamy is over, that you don't have the situation where typically two women or more are married to a man. And they looked at her quite puzzled, and they said, oh, no, it's much worse now. And Joanna was shocked. She said, what do you mean it's worse? I said, well, in the old days, we used to have more women to take care of the children. And in that statement, you see the difference in cultural values. For Joanna, it was about power in gender roles. It was about power in the relationship. It was about sexuality. For these two old Aboriginal women, it was about raising the kids. So, when you think about it, they have a point, there was always at least two women around. So one woman was feeling ill or was, doing something else. The other woman was there available for the children. Same thing applies to the man. If one of the women was fed up with the guy, the other woman was there available to the man. And then the way the Aboriginals organized things is that if you were a man and you had more than one wife, well, then you had the obligations to that wife's family. So consequently, when you hunted and you brought back your meat, the very first cut of the meat, the best, the most prized cut of the meat, went to the mother-in-law. So if you had two wives, you had two mother-in-laws. So you had to provide that meat to both of them before you got anything. So the way that the culture and the society was set up allowed it to function with all these different energies, which are present in our society as well, in a way that wasn't disruptive to the society for at least 100,000 years. We, on the other hand, are struggling with all these ideas, struggling with all these relationships, struggling with all this really objectionable, vile behavior on the part of our fellow men and women. And where do you look for the solution? Do you control their behavior? Well, that's a kind of a tough call. And if controlling behavior, suppression, repression worked, why are we in such a bad situation right now? So finally, for me, it's not a dialogue, a narrative about the right and the wrong, the good and the bad of it, but really about what's the direction we as individuals and as a society need to go in to provide for a better, safer, healthier, happier environment for our children.
You've put forth a little bit of history, and in the chat room, we have been talking about evolution of humanity, and perhaps there were cultures and societies where there were more than one wife. I think that we have evolved not so much that it is a power struggle in terms of the women, but that there's a dedication between a man and a wife, a man and a woman, to dedicate their lives to each other. And I'm going to tell you honestly that I am feeling extremely sad, overwhelmed, and frightened by this discussion, because I'm still searching for an answer. I want to comfort 98% of the people who have been raped are women, and I want to comfort them. I want to tell them that there is a way to protect themselves. I want to tell them that there is a way to find support within a family unit, whether it is a mom, a father, a grandparent, an aunt, a sister, and a brother, whoever, or Debbie, to create.
Debbie, that's a noble and admirable sentiment, one that I share with you. And you and your listeners that are homeopaths have an obligation to help rape victims, both with remedy and with counseling. And again, I would say, to that sentiment and to that concern, that the best strategy is a strategy that yields to higher consciousness. The only way to really transcend the trauma, beyond the help that you can give as a homeopath, beyond the remedy, beyond the psychological dialogue that goes on in a victim's consciousness, the only way to transcend the trauma that I know of is through spiritual work. So, give you an example, I had a friend an Aboriginal friend, who was an alcoholic and also an incredible musician, also quite a famous boxer, an artist. And there are a lot of things to say about Bobby that made him exceptional, but alcoholism destroyed him and put him in a coma. And when he went into that coma, he had a vision of elders, Aboriginal elders. And when he got out of the coma, he went and sought them out. And what happened is they cured him of his alcoholism by reintroducing him to his nature as an Aboriginal, to who he was as a spiritual individual. And then Bobby went on to start a very successful, they had something like an 80% success rate, Aboriginal Alcoholism Rehabilitation Center. And the Aboriginals, like the Native Americans, didn't have any fermented beverages in their history. So when alcohol came from the Westerners, their genetically and historically, their organism had no way of dealing with it. So it absolutely destroyed them, just as it did the Native Americans, just as it did the Aboriginals. However, Bobby was able to help these traumatized, destroyed individuals. He was able to reconstitute them, to give them a sense of meaning in life, and to help them pass their trauma through a reintroduction to the spiritual verities of their own tradition, to show them that they as Aboriginals had something culturally that was unique and special, and allowed them to get over their particular issue. So, the question, Debbie, becomes, an emotional one, certainly, in terms of emotional support. Your close ones, your dear ones, your near ones are the ones that are likely to give you that. But in terms of professional help, Homeopath can give, or help that a publisher can give by virtue of the books that they publish, I would say that the way to support and help rape victims is through giving them, to the degree we can, a sense of meaning and purpose in life that's tied to a spiritual direction, a direction that lifts them out of their pain and suffering and gives them something to nourish them above and beyond the trauma that they've suffered.
Well, I think that this is not a one-sided disease. I don't think it is just healing those who have been harmed and attacked and have had to deal with this trauma. I appreciate all of the references to Hahnemann, to Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, and his wisdom and knowledge about learning about disorders, dysfunctions in the body, and healing the vital force within us. I would like to know how we can reach out to those who are within their own trauma and disorder, the ones who do these acts. I mean, we send young boys off to war, to places far from home, and put them in situations where they do horrendous acts and they feel bad when they come home. I mean, there are so many different situations that we could talk about, specific situations that people are put in where they lose their humanity. They lose the soul energy of the pure heart of gold that they came into this world with. I'm just really upset because I would like to see help for both sides of the issue, the people who have been hurt and the people who are hurting because they do these acts. And if anybody is out there, if anybody is listening and you have information of something that worked for you, some story, some method, a book that you have read, anything that can help another human being be uplifted, as Ehud says we must do to help each other. I've always said in my talks that we are angels on this earth. We are here to help another human being. And if you can get in touch with that good, compassionate part of you, I mean, this is really hard for me. I'm not able to talk about this topic in an unemotional way.
I don't think you should. You should let your emotions.
Just relax. Just relax, Debbie. Yes, just relax. And basically, the thoughts arising in the mind is just a constitutional error. If we are saying about theory about the homeopathy, we have a lot of medicines regarding these symptoms. When we are talking about these medicines, they have the more sexuality in many forms.
I'm laughing because my producer Amnon walked out of the room and he came back and handed me this little bottle. I don't know if you can see it. But it says
Yes,
Ignatia.
yes, can see. Yeah, but
It's Ignatia for
but
grief,
yeah,
and so
Right.
he's making me kind of laugh.
yes,
But
but we are thinking about those victims who are sexually harassed. Then if we are feeling so sad, then how they feel,
I
and
know, that's exactly
basically,
what I'm saying.
this,
I'm not the
yes,
one who has even been hurt, and I hurt.
Debbie, we have a lot of prisoners that write to our publishing house asking for books. So
yes,
even the most desperate and destroyed individual has within them the power of redemption. And as Dr. Sharma was saying, there are remedies to help them. There's people to talk to individuals that have been destroyed in this way, and there's also a societal aspect to all of this. But the society is made up of individuals. So really, I look to the upliftment of society on a one by one basis, just as a homeopath has to deal with the patient in front of them, right? But that patient in front of them might show a miasm that struck a whole generation, right? That struck a whole generation. So you're seeing something in that individual, a miasm, that you'll see in 100 other individuals. And this has come up to us through centuries. So we also have to take into perspective the amount of time and the unfolding of time. And in looking at these matters, look at them as generational, look at them in connection with the spirit of the time, and to the degree we can help each other, help each other. And that creates a community, just like you have a homeopathic community. Wherever I've gone throughout the world, and I've traveled around the world numerous times, from very, quote, humble situations to very high-flying situations, I find the same sentiments in individuals, and I find the same tribe gathering around the same value set, whether they were raised Hindu or Jewish or Christian or Muslim or whatever it might be. There is a common strength and a common thread that runs through individuals that are attracted to these ideas and are attracted to these therapies. And in my view, they represent the future. So I look to the future, and I look to the future generations in terms of how I behave. As the Native Americans said, whatever we do, we should do for the next 7 generations. So we as homeopaths, practitioners, well-wishers, we need to join together, as you're saying, join together as a community and promote and support the ideas, the books, the products, the foods that are a positive, uplifting remedy for humanity.
You know, I realize that you're late for your appointment, so you really have to be going. And I have appreciated that you stuck with us through the technical difficulties, because this was a powerful talk. I think anybody who's listening or will listen to the future archive will give them something to think about, and to realize that they are one person and they can help one person. They can reach out and do what they feel is within their power in their lifetime. So I know that you have to run, and we will welcome you back again in a future time, and we'll be all set for the technical problems, which we won't have next time.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, okay.
definitely.
My pleasure chatting with you this morning, and to your listeners, I wish them health and happiness, and the joy of living together in a peaceful world. We should all have that in our hearts. So I'll say goodbye now.
Amen.
And thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Well, he did have an earlier appointment. He went past his time, and I would like to encourage people to visit the Inner Traditions website, because it does have thousands of books about culture, spirituality, ethnicity, meditation, everything that you could wish for. And if that's what you're searching for, that's a good place to go. if Dr. Sharma has anything to say, I think we're going to end up doing a special Blog Talk radio show about homeopathic remedies dealing with this type of trauma, both for the woman who has been injured and for the perpetrators of these crimes.
Yes, definitely, Debbie. And I would like to introduce also the miasmatic concept behind this cause. Basically, if we are talking about the polluting agent, the miasm, and homeopathy is well known for the miasm, that is psora, syphilis, and psychosis. These are the type of miasm that homeopathy considered. And one of the miasm is cancer miasm. That is a combination of psychosis and syphilitic. And maximum type of sexual harassment and crime are due to the cancer miasm. Maximum time that we will talk in the BTR show with the medicines.
I think what I heard Ehud say at the end of the programming here was that within each culture, within each society, there is a solution.
Yes, definitely.
If they go back to their fundamental roots of the development of the society, to understand who they are, the richness in each society, rather than repressing and suppressing each society and culture, that each one is going to find their own form of a solution to go back to their rituals, to practices of community, practices of supporting each other, to create stability in the society, financially, spiritually, materially. We don't need so much. We don't need to dominate others. We need to live in harmony with each other. And to do that, we have to change the way we think, our mental the way we are thinking about ourselves and each other, that look for the good in everyone. Draw out that spark of goodness that's in each of us, and that is the light that we have to bring into the world. This has been a rough time for me.
Yes, and another solution is the very big punishment to the criminal. That will be a next issue. If we are talking about the country like Dubai and UAE, and there is no rate of crime, there is no rape. Definitely, because the punishment is so high, they will kill the criminal in the road and by the people.
Who will do this, Dr. Deepak? Who will kill?
Yes,
you're saying they're
in UAE and Dubai, as I heard many times. One of my patients told about that there is no rape cases in UAE and Dubai.
Oh.
So because the punishment is so high.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
They can cut the hand of criminal, or they can cut the leg of the criminal. That is a so big punishment for the criminal. This may be the solution, but it is not a humanity.
That is a whole topic unto itself: corporal punishment and the death sentence, and if that is humane, because a lot of times, actually the statistic that I read was only 2% of the claims of rape were false. But still, it is a very difficult decision to make, to kill another person without trying to rehabilitate them, without trying to make a repair to humanity. I'm not sure where I stand on corporal punishment personally myself, but if it works in a country, we need to examine and investigate how and why it does work. So I want to thank all of our listeners, the people who have tuned into this show today. If you have comments, if anybody wants to call in at the last moment, I mean, if you want to put comments in, if you want to speak with us in the future, you can contact me at homeopathyworldcommunity@gmail.com. You can go on to Facebook, Homeopathy World Community. I'm on Twitter at Debby Bruck. And you can contact Dr. Sharma at orbitsclinic.com. We're going to have many other important topics in the coming weeks, besides learning how to take a mother learning how to take a case, and the topic of grief itself and loss is going to be coming up. If you have ideas for shows, please let us know. And I want to thank Dr. Sharma for being with us today, as usual. I'm going to sign off, sending my love out to the world, to listeners, to anybody who can get this message. Thank you.
Thanks for my side. Thanks everyone. Thanks Debbie and thanks Adnan.
Thank you for the remedy, Amnon.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Health In with Debby Bruck, Mondays 11 a.m. till noon. The Scope of Things with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays 8 to 9 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com.